Well, hello and welcome to this edition of River City Blue. And as you can see, we're joined by a special guest today, and that is Lieutenant Mike Wallace. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk to you today as we head into the holiday season, because it is very important, and not just around the holiday season, but all year long. And that are some of the phone scams and the mail scams that are going around the area. We want to highlight a couple of those and talk to you about ways to protect yourself against these scams, because there's always someone out there looking for a way to take advantage of the unsuspecting public. So, Lieutenant, let's turn to you for just a moment, if we may. We want to give our viewers a sense of just how much experience we bring to the table when we try to share these pieces of information with them. So, how many years you got on with the Danville Police Department now?
I was hired in July of 1987.
So that's been a minute or two.
Yeah, it has. It just it's flown by, but it has. Yeah.
So, and in that time, you've been able to garner a lot of experience as a patrol officer, an investigator, a supervisor,
Right.
an undercover officer. So, when it comes to these scams and things like this, and we're gonna talk about some specifics in just a moment. What is one of the hardest things for an investigator when we're investigating a scam, especially one that comes via telephone or from the mail that someone has responded to? What makes it so hard for the Danville Police Department to investigate those kind of things?
You know, I can remember early on, the pigeon drop scam. Where it involved someone dropping some money in the parking lot and getting approached and saying, "Hey, I found some money. I'm going to need some money from you, and then we'll share this money," kind of thing. There was always variations of that. And of course, when the internet comes along, you have forms of that as well. But one of the most difficult things, a lot of times people don't report them when they're victims of scam.
And why do you think that is?
Well, they're embarrassed. They don't really want, or they'll report it, but they don't really want anything done about it because they're embarrassed that they were, that they were taken. And with these computer scams, in addition to that, you don't know where they originate.
Right.
That's a difficult thing. It could be overseas. It's difficult to know where the money's going to go. It may actually go to one place, but it's going to be transferred to another.
Right.
So it's difficult to know those things, or it's difficult to know where a compromise took place, where your information was compromised.
So, for the unsuspecting public out here, let's talk more specifically about one or two that's happened very recently. Just this week, we had information come to the Danville Police Department about the IRS scam, and this is where someone calls an unsuspecting citizen and proclaims themselves to be with the IRS. And they let this person know that they have personal information on them. Sometimes they may even proffer part of a social security number or date of birth. Are they fishing for you to verify that information at that point?
Yeah, they can be. I mean, they may have a social security number and they want you to respond, "Yeah, that is my number," or they may truly have it already. They may have gotten it off the internet somewhere.
Right. And in a lot of those cases, especially with this IRS thing, they try to let people know that law enforcement is on the way. You really, but we can thwart that. We can stop that in its tracks if you want to settle up with a credit card today.
Correct.
And we want people to kind of understand that first and foremost, from that standpoint, we don't generally investigate IRS problems. The Danville Police Department doesn't. Those are handled by IRS investigators.
Correct.
And the IRS generally does not make phone contact with citizens who have tax issues or are in arrears on their tax bills or whatnot, or fail to file. And in most cases, what you're going to find is that the IRS is going to concentrate on corresponding with you by mail.
Correct.
There's going to be seals from the Department of the Treasury and the different things that you can use to identify that. Most of that correspondence is going to come either out of DC or out of Philadelphia. And if you have a question about that, there's always numbers that we have available that you can call your local tax office and get transferred and get some information on that. So it's kind of, you want to keep a couple things in mind when you're talking about these particular scams. First off, if you know that you don't have any outstanding tax bills and you filed appropriately and you've actually obtained a refund, this, that, and the other, you should automatically know that you don't owe any money. And if you happen to find yourself in one of these positions where you do have an issue with that, you can always cut that phone call short by saying, I'll look into this on my own time and just disconnect. Because the longer you keep that person on the phone, there's also other risks. And what could some of those other risks be if you keep that caller on the line?
Well, the most simple one is you're going to give up information that you didn't want to.
Inadvertently.
Correct.
And then there's also the possibility, because these scammers, they don't have just one trick in their bag. They could actually be attaching long-distance phone charges
Correct.
to your reverse billing, in essence. And unsuspectingly, you're playing right into that.
Correct.
So let's talk just a minute also about the money wiring scams. That seems to be a very popular one. We've actually had a couple of instances recently where some individuals have fallen victim to that. And how that starts out is you're the unsuspecting victim.
Right.
You receive a phone call, and a lot of times, unfortunately, these target our seniors in the area. And,
Correct.
And you get information that a family member has been injured and they're in the hospital, or maybe they've
Right.
been incarcerated and they need bail or bond money.
Sometimes a phone call may be garbled. You don't quite understand all of it, and that may be part of the procedure as well.
Sure.
I can't quite pick out what you're saying, so there's a sense of urgency there.
And a lot of times when this caller, they practice at this stuff, so they're going to give you key pieces of information, like I'm calling about your grandchild, and obviously the first grandchild that you think of is going to be the oldest, the one that's furthest away from home, and you're going to say, oh no, not Bobby or not so and so, and then they've got a piece of information, they've got a name, and they're going to use that through the rest of the conversation. The one that we had very recently here in the city was individual was called like that and indicated that there was an arrest, they needed some bail money, but what they wanted the caller to do was to wire the money Western Union to a particular place, and it had nothing to do with the place of incarceration.
Right.
So you kind of have to learn to read between the lines on that.
The green dot card is another.
Right.
Place the money on a green dot.
And then
card.
call us and give us the card number.
Correct.
So, you've got to be able to understand that when they're giving you specific instructions, it's because they want the money. They
Right.
want just the money. There is no arrest. There is no sick family member in a hospital that needs immediate services.
They don't give you a phone number to the facility or anything like that. They just
Right.
want the money.
So a lot of times the best way to deal with that is well, let me check into that and I'll get back with you, and go ahead and disconnect. And then if you have a problem with that, of course the Danville Police Department can always help. If they've given you the name of a place, we can try to make contact with that law enforcement agency. First and foremost, try to contact your family members.
Right.
Hey, is this going on? Is this going on? I have this. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and you're right about a lot of people being somewhat private about these type things.
Right.
In the most recent case, it was several thousands of dollars that this individual wired to an unknown place, and that's most unfortunate. And then because of the embarrassment, not wanting to let family members know, it took
Right.
several days before law enforcement was able to get involved, and that's most unfortunate. Are there any other tips, Lieutenant, that you'd be able to provide to our viewers when it comes to protecting themselves against these type scams?
With the convenience of the internet, if it's convenient for you to make a purchase on the internet, then it's probably convenient for someone who engages in fraud to get your information. It is nice to be able to go on the internet and make purchases wherever you want to, but it does put your information out there on the World Wide Web, and there are ways to get your information and to capture it. As many ways as there are to get on the internet, there are ways, or to surf the internet, there are ways to get it. And
so as a protection, if that's something that you're accustomed to doing, then as a fail-safe for that, you should always check your statements regularly. You should always, at least once a year, try to get a copy of your credit report to look for charges that you didn't make or accounts
Right.
that you didn't know about. And if you find discrepancies, and you need to get on those pretty quickly with fraud alerts and things like that. And we have lots of information on our website that we can direct you to. And of course, you can always call the Crime Prevention Office. It's 434-797-8898. We can give you additionally on that as well. Well, Lieutenant, we thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to kind of give us some of the the tips and the tricks that you've learned over the years. We hope that people will take advantage of this, and if they have questions, to call us.
Yeah, call us.
So
That's what we're here
appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
You make me wear my bike helmet. Taught me never to run with scissors.
You tell me to stay away from drugs.
To always buckle my seatbelt.
And to follow the swimming rules.
You're always looking out for me and trying to keep me safe.
So why do you keep a loaded gun in your drawer?
Here in the garage.
Closet. Shoebox under the bed. Where anyone can get to it. How safe is that?
How safe is that?
How safe is that?
You asked them to follow some safety rules. Now they're asking you. In fact, they're counting on you. Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. If you own a firearm and are not using it, please be responsible and be sure that it's stored in a safe place. Remember, always lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org.
Well, welcome back, and we're joined now with our second guest of this particular edition of River City Blue, and that's Investigator Katie Hendricks with the Danville Police Department. And Investigator Hendricks, we thank you for being with us today on River City Blue.
Thank you.
So we want to kind of establish with our viewers a little bit about the Danville Police Department. We are a service-based organization. We want people to feel comfortable when they approach the Danville Police Department. So we try to give our viewers a little bit of a background on the individuals that we have on as guests. So how long have you been with the Danville Police Department now?
Almost 12 years.
Almost 12 years. And in that 12 years, you've been very fortunate. You've worked patrol,
Yes.
community police,
Yes.
special investigations, which is
Yes.
undercover work, and now you're an investigator, and you handle what type of crimes?
Most frauds, white-collar financial crimes.
White-collar financial crimes. As you can tell, that's going to tie right in with what we talked about with Lieutenant Wallace in the first portion, and that's the scams and schemes that are going around. So we wanted to bring in someone who's actually hands-on with this type of crime and kind of get their perspective on why it's so important that you take steps to protect yourself so that you don't become a victim. So in a nutshell, these cases happen all the time.
They do.
And unfortunately, there's probably more of them. We mentioned this with Lieutenant Wallace the other segment. There's a lot of cases where a lot of time has elapsed before it gets reported because people are embarrassed about being a victim. People are ashamed to let their family know, especially if it's seniors. Even if it's younger people. You and I were talking just before this particular segment. There's a lot of scams out there involving college students.
Yes.
Applying for financial aid, and once they release that information and they get a fraudulent check and go to spend some of that, then they realize they're on the hook for money. We've had cases like that. So people they either don't know how to handle their finances or monitor their finances, and then the other aspect of that is they're ashamed and don't want to come forward and let it be known that they've been a victim. So that makes it much harder from an investigative standpoint. So the longer the time that has elapsed, is it safe to say that it makes it that much harder to investigate that crime?
It does, especially if it's something that's occurred locally. It's a little bit easier. The quicker it gets to me, the quicker I can try to pull video or things like that, try to speak with someone who maybe a cashier, a teller, someone who actually worked or met with the suspect.
So a lot of the cases that happen locally involve stolen credit cards or credit cards that were fraudulently obtained, and people have gone places and used those physically. And in those cases, we're actually able to piece those pieces back together, as you mentioned, with video,
Yes.
tracking someone through. We've got transaction records that show credit card numbers and things like that. So those cases are relatively easier to work, not the easiest,
Easier, yes.
but easier to work.
But easier.
But the ones that really become difficult are the ones where you have a victim that has wired money somewhere, a victim that has cashed a fake check or has attempted to cash a fake check one place and told that it's fraudulent. They take it to another place and actually get it by the teller. And people don't understand the dangers in that. So in in the sense of timing, if I were a victim of a fraud and someone, let's use the money wire scheme, for instance, and someone had convinced me that I needed to wire a certain sum of money to help a sick family member or someone who's in jail, and I did that, how much time in reality could elapse before that money is, for most part, almost gone for good?
Probably 10 or 15 minutes.
So at a minimum, if I can recall that transaction or stop that transaction in the first 15 minutes,
There's a chance of at least getting some of the money back.
but after that, the chances are extremely, extremely hard.
It becomes much more difficult to follow it because normally with a wire transfer, it's transferred to one place just long enough to clear, and then it's wired out of the country.
And then it's going to bounce around several places,
Yes, sir.
and then it makes tracking extremely hard.
If not impossible.
And then the other aspect of that is, you know, if it's convenient for us, such as online services and bill paying and things like that, then it's that much easier for the criminal who has practiced and finessed what they're looking at. So people have to kind of understand that this is the financial system that we live in and that we have to use. So there are things that they can do to protect themselves, and we'll talk about those in just a second. But going back to the money transfers, depending on whether or not they're using you know, proxy servers that don't track the information, and for those of you who aren't familiar, that means an anonymous web-based portal where you can actually go on and it doesn't track your movements on that website or on that IP address. And then free Wi-Fi zones. I mean, if I'm sitting in a free Wi-Fi zone and I'm bouncing off of that internet server and I'm producing a scam and somebody's responding back to me, and then the next time I'm going to respond from yet another free Wi-Fi zone, that thing's bounced all over different places, and it's just going to be almost impossible to follow.
It is.
And we had a case that you and I talked about a while back where an individual placed thousands of dollars of orders through PayPal accounts and things like that. And even though you were successful in making, you know, 25 or 30 charges against this individual, there were several hundred that we couldn't make charges on.
Correct.
Because we couldn't track the actual transaction.
Correct. It was difficult to establish jurisdiction because that individual was using their laptop and free Wi-Fi spots, and occasionally if something was ordered on PayPal and it was shipped and it went to that person's residence, then, you know, that made it a lot easier. But just where the crime initiated, where it started, depending on where the Wi-Fi spot was that they were using.
So we want people to understand that these crimes are something that we take serious, and in situations where it involves interstate, meaning multiple states, multiple victims, and in very large dollar amounts, it is possible to include federal assistance, but it has to reach a certain threshold before we can actually turn that over to the federal authorities for investigation and let them handle it.
They're very good about, you know, if I call in their cyber crimes division or things like that, they're very quick to offer whatever assistance they can to, you know, to a certain extent. Once it gets to a certain dollar amount, and when you include the different countries and the different states and the multiple jurisdictions and different financial institutions, it has to reach a certain dollar threshold or number of victims in order for them to take the case over and prosecute it federally. And that's difficult.
And also very time consuming.
Absolutely.
So you could take something that where if we've got video and we actually can monitor someone and then later identify them, you know, a couple months tops, trying to identify somebody into a year or more, trying to follow all of these leads through these different sources.
Yes.
So what can a citizen do to protect themselves? You know, we've kind of hashed this out in our minds and talked this over just a little bit. But, you know, one of the things that I think of, you know, we're headed into the holiday season. There's already several of our major retailers in this country that are reeling, so to speak, from hacks on their credit card customers. So, you know, if you're going to make a transaction, you know, make sure that when you make the transaction, you know, you follow that up with checking your statement.
If you're online and you can check your statement daily, that's probably a good idea, because with a lot of these criminals, what they'll do is if they get your number, it may be a very small charge on your account, a couple of dollars, even some change, you know, 83 cents here, $1.52 there, just to see if it's going to go through. And if you don't catch it and you don't question it, then the next thing they're going to do is going to be something big.
Right. So monitor your statements daily, monitor your accounts, look for charges that you didn't make. You know, how about even pulling a copy of your credit report? You know, you're entitled to one free one a year.
That's something
Please
you should
take
do at least
advantage
once
of
a year.
that. And we have tons of resources on our website about this particular things, credit card frauds and scams. And you know, our link also will provide you a link to the Federal Trade Commission, which is a wealth of information, and it all goes back to that identity theft. And just to kind of tie in, you know, part of the convenience that we enjoy in our society, it comes with a certain level of responsibility.
Absolutely.
We can't just assume that, well, you know, I made that transaction, I'll wait for my package to arrive, I'll wait for my paid statement to arrive that I paid that bill. We have to follow up, we have to make sure that all of this stuff is documented, and the first time anything looks out of the ordinary, we need to take the appropriate steps. So I would feel much better. I know, you know, I field calls in my office all the time, and I know that you do as well. I'd feel much better if you would call us if you have any question about, you know, you've received something in the mail and you're a little concerned about it. Maybe you got a phone call that seemed a little sketchy. You know, put the brakes on that before you jump and act. Give one of us a call. You can call the Crime Prevention Office at 797-8898. You can call the Investigations Office at 799-6508 and ask for Investigator Hendricks. And between the two of us and any other officer down here, we're more than happy to provide you with information. We would much rather keep you from becoming a victim than have to spend hours and hours trying to sort this out, and then you only get, you know, a fraction back of what you lost.
If I can take 5 minutes and 15, 20 minutes and check into something to keep you from becoming a victim, then I would much rather do that than to have to sit down with you and tell you, I'm sorry, I can't get your money back, it's gone.
And believe it or not, a lot of people think, you know, the duties and responsibilities of a law enforcement agency are, you know, taking the reports, investigating crimes, making arrests, and that's all integral parts of it. But the very first thing in the code section when it deals with law enforcement agencies, especially in the Commonwealth of Virginia, is the prevention.
Yes.
It says so right in the Code of Virginia. So give us the opportunity to help you prevent yourself from becoming a victim. If you've got questions, give us a call. And just kind of also to wrap this up, I know towards this time of year, we always have other types of scams that seem to pop up, and we want some people to be aware of a few of these as well. The heating oil scam.
Yes.
We've had people call and say, listen, we want to deposit some money in your account because to help out with your heating costs, can you verify your account number? Well, first off, you know, what's the first rule of thumb? Did you apply for it?
They're not going to call you and offer. It's something that you have to apply for. If it's something that you need, there are different places we can send you to get you assistance, but most places aren't going to seek you out.
So if you applied for that service, then that's one thing. But if you haven't applied for any type of assistance and someone's wanting you to give bank account information or verify bank account information or personal information, that ought to be a red flag right from the start that, you know, this is probably a scam. Let me put the brakes on this. Let me call and question this. We mentioned a little bit about the student loan scams. There's quite a few of those going on out there. You know, a lot of these young people are trying to find creative ways to avoid huge student debts. You know, you got to be extremely careful when you check out these places and you put your personal information online. It goes out there if it's not a trusted, reliable source. Most of the time, you know, should they check with the financial aid office of the institution where they're trying to go to school first?
Absolutely. Because a lot of times they'll get online and they'll fill out different scholarship and grant forms and loans and things online. Then they'll receive a check in the mail, believing it to be legitimate. When they cash it, and then they'll use it to pay for school or books or whatever they need for school, the money's gone, they've spent it, and then when it comes back that that's a fraudulent check, they're on the hook for that money.
They're on the hook.
They owe that money to the
So
bank.
now, instead of being just in debt for schoolwork, they're also in debt for money that never really existed to begin with.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's always the construction frauds. This time of year, you know, people are going around looking for ways to earn an extra buck or a quick buck at our expense. And so, you know, you've got the people that'll pull up with a couple of ladders on the truck, not knocking hardworking people out there at all that go door to door, but, you know, hey, I was riding down the road and I noticed that your gutters look overflowing, or there's a leak on your roof. You know, stop before you engage these kind of people. If you haven't had issues with water in your house, how are they going to know you've got a leak on your roof? You know, take a look around and make sure your gutters are clean. You know, there are plenty of services out there, if you're unable to do it, that can assist you with that. Legitimate services. Don't be taken victim. There's also the paving scams. You know, these guys will roll in certain times of the year, and they've got like a truck and, you know, half a load of something on here, and hey, we just finished up a job and you look like you could use a little bit right here, and this stuff ends up being like, you know, less than a ½ inch thick, and then by the time the ground freezes and these guys have pocketed your cash or cashed your check, this asphalt is all broken to pieces. So we get a lot of those, and people are out their money. There again, it just falls back to a little bit of prevention goes a long way. I know for me, and you've heard Investigator Hendricks say it, give us a call. We'll try to fend off as much of that as we can up to the forefront. Well, we definitely appreciate you being on the show with us today and providing some insight from an investigative standpoint into a lot of the hard work and the tedious hours that go into this. Is there anything you'd like to add just as a closing to let our viewers know that, you know, we got your back on this, but you got to help us out a little bit too?
Checks don't come with instructions. So if you get a check in the mail and it has instructions, there's a really good chance that it's not legitimate.
Right.
If your bank teller, your cashier asks you questions that may seem out of the ordinary, there may be a reason for it.
Because they're trained. They
Absolutely.
know what to look for.
And you know, they can't tell you, no, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to wire this money for you. But at the same time, they obviously, they know that something may not be right. So they may ask you a few extra questions that seem out of the ordinary. That should all make you question what's going on.
And at bottom line, if you have questions, call us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of River City Blue. We thank you for joining us, and don't forget, this is your Danville Police Department. So if you have questions, give us a call.